Imagine driving into a ghost town entirely abandoned, except for a few lonely residents. As you travel down a faded road covered in graffiti, steam rises from deep cracks in the ground, creating an increasingly hot and foggy atmosphere. Despite what these eerie surroundings might suggest, you haven't just wandered into Silent Hill, nor are you characters in a B-list horror movie. This slice of hell is in fact Centralia, tucked away in central Pennsylvania. About an hour northeast of Harrisburg and just as far southwest of Scranton, this small deserted town has been home to an underground mine fire that has burned for over 60 years. Today we're diving into the haunting story of Centralia and its never-ending inferno. To say that Pennsylvania and the coal mining industry have an intimate relationship would be a bit of an understatement. The state contains about 95% of all the anthracite coal, also known as hard coal, found in the United States, making it virtually the nation's sole source of this rare resource. While other countries also possess these reserves, the central and northeastern regions of Pennsylvania boast the largest known deposits in the world. Anthracite stands apart from other types of coal by being rather simply superior in pretty much every way. Thanks to its high fixed carbon content and low levels of volatile matter, it burns hotter, slower, and cleaner than other varieties. It's also denser and harder, making it highly prized for both industrial uses and heating. According to a 2022 report, Pennsylvania is home to 108 active coal mines, 80 surface mines, and 28 underground. Altogether, these operations produce about 40,000 tons of coal annually. However, less than 2,500 of those tons are the rare anthracite, which is mined in only 6 counties across Pennsylvania, including Columbia County. Coal mining first began in the region in 1842 when large deposits of the sooty substance were discovered in nearby Buck Mountain. Before long, both open pit strip mines and underground operations had been established, giving rise to several mining towns, including Centralia. In 1862, the city was founded, formalizing mining efforts in that area. Most of the town's residents found work with the Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company, which played a key role in the town's official incorporation in 1866. In the early years, Centralia flourished. The town boasted multiple hotels, 2 theaters, and 14 different stores. However, as anyone who has lived in a mining town can attest, such growth and prosperity are closely tied to the fortunes of the mining industry. When a town is built around a single market, its stability and inevitability rises and falls with that industry's success. Unfortunately for Centralia, coal usage peaked during World War I and then steadily declined throughout the 20th century as the world shifted towards more cost-effective energy sources. As demand for coal diminished, the once bustling and promising town began a slow descent into decline. While Centralia boasted a population of over 2,000 residents in the 1890 census, that number had dropped to around 1,500 by the 1960s. The town's extensive network of underground mines was gradually sealed off, and many were abandoned entirely. Meanwhile, the open pit strip mines, long since depleted, were left as gaping scars on the landscape, silent reminders of a potential that never fully materialized. This is a story all too familiar throughout the Commonwealth, and indeed across much of the United States. In Pennsylvania alone, there are over 11,000 abandoned mines. As a side note, Pennsylvania is just one of 4 states that is officially both a state and a commonwealth. Either term is correct here. In these situations, there is often little that can be done. More often than not, residents are forced to seek new jobs and rebuild their lives elsewhere, leaving behind the towns they once called home. Those who stay do their best to adapt, sometimes creating new forms of local economy with mining museums, unusual roadside attractions, or by repurposing old mines for entirely new uses. By 1962, the roughly 1,500 residents still living in Centralia, who had tried to keep the town alive, began facing an entirely new problem. For decades, townspeople have been dumping their trash wherever they pleased, often using abandoned mines as makeshift landfills. This practice created multiple unregulated dumps throughout the area, leading to an infestation of rats and other vermin, and the pervasive stench became nearly impossible to escape. The Centralia Council, responsible for making decisions affecting the town, agreed that action was necessary, especially with Memorial Day festivities approaching. Although Centralia was no longer a thriving city, many residents still felt a strong sense of community pride. To address the issue, the council suggested a familiar solution, repurposing one of the town's old empty mining pits as a landfill. The pit they chose, originally excavated around 1935, measured about 75 feet wide and 50 feet deep. It had already served various town needs in the past. However, it soon became apparent that the accumulated trash was taking up more space than anticipated. In response, the council decided that the best course of action was to burn the garbage in the pit the same year they began using it, 1962. While today we recognize the dangers of burning trash, including the release of toxic fumes that can lead to respiratory problems, cancer, and widespread environmental pollution, this awareness developed slowly over the latter half of the 20th century. Even now, in some rural areas of the U.S., it's not unusual for people to disregard regulations and burn whatever waste they choose to on their own properties. So at the time, burning trash didn't seem like a major issue. Unfortunately, it wasn't just this act, but rather a separate and far more serious mistake that would turn a local garbage problem into something, oh, so much worse. By law, abandoned underground mining areas are required to have their entrances sealed off with a non-combustible shale barrier. This measure not only helps prevent the spread of contaminated water and dangerous gases into nearby interconnected mines, but also protects the surrounding environment. However, before the establishment of the Mine Safety and Health Administration in 1977, oversight of the mining industry was the responsibility of the Bureau of Mines, an agency that was, of course, often underfunded, understaffed, and less organized compared to its successor. As a result, the early years of mining were marked by frequent accidents, numerous fatalities, and a widespread failure to properly seal or document abandoned mine sites. In states like Pennsylvania and Utah, outdoor enthusiasts still occasionally fall into or get lost in these forgotten tunnels, which remain scattered across the landscape. Centralia was no exception. Near the town's chosen location for the garbage burning pit, a neglected 15-foot deep hole left behind from earlier underground mining activity remained open and unnoticed, and it's believed that when the garbage fire was set, flames spread to nearby carbon-rich waste and then made their way into this previously overlooked mine shaft. Once the fire reached the coal-fired underground tunnels, a network of interconnected seams and abandoned mining operations running beneath the town, it was already too late. Unbeknownst to the people of Centralia, a relentless underground fire had begun, burning directly beneath their homes, driveways, churches, and businesses. Life on the surface continued as usual, while below, the town was quite literally starting to fall apart. While one might assume that a situation like this would demand immediate action, mine fires like this one were and still are remarkably common across Pennsylvania. As a result, many are simply left to burn out on their own since the cost and risk of extinguishing them often outweigh the potential benefits. That said, some early efforts were made to smother the fire using water, clay, and other materials. These attempts largely failed. However, and with limited resources stretched thin by several more severe fires elsewhere in the state, most of these efforts were just eventually abandoned. Additionally, few people anticipated just how quickly and widely the fire would spread, assuming it was relatively contained. Life above ground continued much as it always had, with many local mines even remaining open for work. However, within just a few months, on August 9, 1962, carbon monoxide was detected in Centralia's mines, forcing the remaining ones to be shut down and abruptly cutting off the town's primary source of employment. Despite the setback, many residents chose to stay, either hopeful that the situation would eventually be resolved or determined to keep the town alive through other means. Unfortunately, though, this became increasingly difficult as the underground fire worsened, continuing to spread from mine to mine beneath the town. In 1979, the owner of a local gas station became curious about whether and how the underground fires were impacting the gasoline stored beneath the property. After testing the fuel, they discovered it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than normal. While the temperature wasn't high enough to pose an immediate safety risk, it gave the remaining residents a sobering glimpse into the severity of what was happening below ground. Throughout the 70s and 80s, government officials regularly conducted temperature checks on the fire itself. consistently recording readings over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, with the highest ever recorded reaching 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Although many residents of Centralia chose to stay, the consequences of the fire extended far beyond the mines. As local journalist David D. Koch described in his 1986 book, Unseen Danger, residents often endured, quote, burning eyes, the taste of sulfur, and an odor accompanied by headaches, lassitude, and respiratory troubles. In the 80s, however, the situation in Centralia deteriorated further, as more coal seams burned out, destabilizing the ground beneath the streets and leading to the sudden appearance of sinkholes throughout the town. In 1981, one such sinkhole nearly claimed the life of 12-year-old Todd Dombrowski. While running through a local yard, the ground suddenly gave way beneath him. Fortunately, Todd managed to grab onto a nearby tree root and held on until help arrived to pull him to safety. Although he escaped unharmed, the incident attracted national attention and raised both public concern and legislative demands for a permanent solution to the seemingly unstoppable fire. Between 1962 and 1983, as previously noted, several attempts were made to extinguish or control the fire, with around $7 million allocated during that period. This amount included funds for relocation assistance for residents who chose to leave. However, after Todd Dombrowski's near-death experience, state officials began to take the situation much more seriously and started exploring the possibility of fully extinguishing the fire. By 1984, estimates suggested that the cost of putting out the fire would be around $660 million. That's over $2 billion today, compared to the mere $50,000 it would have cost to address the issue back in 1962, had the proper means been available at the time. Given the overwhelming cost of a viable solution to the fire, many officials concluded that it made more sense to abandon the town entirely rather than attempt to save it. As a result, Congress passed a $42 million bill aimed at helping the remaining families relocate. Surprisingly, however, only about half the families accepted the assistance, while the rest chose to stay in Centralia, remaining in the homes they'd known their entire lives despite the ongoing health risks. For a time, the government allowed them to remain, likely hoping that the remaining residents would eventually reconsider their decision and leave the hazardous area voluntarily. By 1992, the state of Pennsylvania had lost patience. It declared eminent domain over the entire town of Centralia, condemning all remaining buildings and effectively rendering anyone who stayed behind a squatter. A decade later, the town's zip code was officially revoked, unincorporating Centralia and transferring postal services to nearby Ashland. Despite the declaration of eminent domain, a small group of residents remained and attempted to challenge the state's decision through legal means. But they were ultimately unsuccessful. Nevertheless, for more than a decade afterward, Pennsylvania chose not to enforce evictions, allowing the remaining residents to stay in Centralia despite the legal and environmental risks. But that changed in 2009 when then Governor Ed Rendell decided enough was enough and initiated formal evictions of the remaining residents. Yet even this effort fell short. Despite his actions, 5 homes were still occupied, and the families living in them once again took legal action against the state, this time alleging they were victims of massive fraud. According to these residents, the state's true motive wasn't public safety or concern about the fire, but rather a desire to access the rare coal beneath the town. They claimed the government was using a fire as a pretext to seize the land. However, these legal challenges were ultimately unsuccessful as well. In 2012, the courts ruled once again, ordering the remaining residents to vacate. By 2013, the state of Pennsylvania finally acknowledged the futility of its efforts. State and local officials were reached an agreement with the remaining families. They'd be allowed to stay in their homes and retain ownership for the rest of their lives. However, upon their passing, the properties would revert to government ownership under the previously declared eminent domain. Today, only 5 residents remain in a town whose underbelly has been burning for over 60 years. This is despite numerous government interventions, severe health risks, and the total absence of any other civilization for miles around. Visitors to this eerie, haunting ghost town will find streets that are mostly intact, except for the occasional sinkhole or fissure where steam ominously rises from the earth. A few houses still stand, along with long-forgotten graveyards, an abandoned church, scorched patches of vegetation, and driveways that lead to empty, overgrown lots. It's got enough haunting cliches to make your skin crawl. And it's no surprise that many believe Centralia inspired the setting for the previously mentioned video game, Silent Hill. Unsurprisingly, the town has become a roadside attraction for curious passerbys, drawn either by its eerie pop culture legacy or by the infamous underground fire. Although the fire itself remains hidden beneath the surface, the ghost town alone has been enough to lure visitors for decades. One stretch of Route 61, which cuts through Centralia, was closed in the early 90s due to subterranean instability, and it became a particular hotspot. Tourists flocked to the area, leaving behind layers of spray-painted messages and artwork that eventually earned it the nickname the Graffiti Highway. Over time, this stretch transformed into an attraction in its own right. However, in 2020, officials moved to shut it down for good, covering the road with dirt mounds to block public access. Although the fire is invisible from the surface, it continues to be closely monitored by officials to this day. More than 2,000 boreholes have been drilled throughout the Centralia region to aid in surveillance, and the state conducts visual inspections on a monthly basis. Experts estimate that the underground fire, which originally began in a small mining pit, has now spread across more than 400 surface acres and could potentially expand to as many as 3,700. However, this shouldn't be imagined as a single massive blaze engulfing the entire area. Instead, it comprises a network of scattered fires burning beneath the ground. Interestingly, surface mining in the region has actually helped slow the fire's progression. By strip mining, crews remove coal deposits from deep underground, effectively limiting the fuel available for the fire to spread. Despite ongoing concerns, the fire continues to advance, reportedly moving about 50 to 75 feet each year. Officials have confirmed that it has already spread several miles south beneath the now abandoned town of Burnsville, and they believe it has likely extended beyond the Buck Mountain coal bed into those of neighboring mountains. With no active efforts underway to extinguish the blaze, experts estimate that it could keep burning for at least another century. While Centralia's fire is undoubtedly the most infamous mine fire in the United States, it might not even be the largest in Pennsylvania. In fact, it's just one of roughly 40 active mine fires across the state. Some are even older and more expansive than Centralia's, despite its notoriety. On a global scale, underground mine fires are surprisingly common, with thousands potentially burning simultaneously around the world at any given time. Unfortunately, this points to a much deeper issue: the consequences of reckless mining practices. When safety and sustainability are pushed aside in the relentless pursuit of resources, we not only endanger the environment, but we also put human lives at risk and squander the very materials we set out to extract in the first place. Before we wrap up our episode, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Doricade. If you've ever laid in bed at night wondering, yeah, the door's locked, but is it really secure? Well, this is for you. Doricade is a heavy-duty door security bar designed to stop forced entry before it happens. Not slow it down, not make it louder, stop it. It braces directly against the floor, turning your door into a solid barrier that can withstand serious kick-in force. No drilling, no permanent installation, no complicated setup. You just slide it into place, adjust it to fit your door, and that's it. Renters love it, homeowners swear by it, and if you travel, it's portable enough to take with you for hotel stays or Airbnbs. Here's the thing. Most break-ins happen through the front door. Locks can fail, frames can splinter. Doricade adds a second line of defense that doesn't rely on electronics, Wi-Fi, or batteries. Whether you live alone, have kids, or just want peace of mind when you sleep, Doricade gives you that extra layer of not today. So check out the link in the description to get yours and take control of your home security the easy way. And with that, thank you so much for watching and listening to our episode. If you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Larry M. Lease. As always, you can find us on all major podcast platforms, Good Pods, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts from. And with that, we will see you in our next episode. Take care.